Mikee P, Mike Probosi in the Money Players podcast. Weekend recap, PTF across the pond doing Cheltenham things. So Nick Tammaro is with Mikee P this week for a little recap. Nick, so happy to be here with you.
Thrilled, absolutely. I was very nervous that there wasn't going to be a capable replacement for Pete while he was off at Cheltenham, and I was praying I didn't have to call Jonathan. So this is like a huge plus.
You guys were hilarious last week, by the way. Giving just going back and forth with and I'm sure we probably will see you again this weekend with the previews for Gulfstream and Santa Anita. But we need to recap the weekend and of course the eyes of the Triple Crown racing world were fixed on Tampa Bay for this past weekend for the Tampa Bay Derby, and it was an interesting race, to say the least. Plenty of controversy, but Owen Almighty was able to get the front and wire them at odds of 2.9 to 1. The returnees for Chad Brown were second and third. Chancellor McPatrick, Hill Road. I don't think they lost a whole lot in defeat in the race, considering how it shaped. Give us some quick thoughts.
I mean, look, as far as the winner goes, we've now heard pretty clearly that Brian Lynch does not really want to run this horse in the Kentucky Derby. We've seen this before. He obviously felt similarly with Classic Causeway a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. And, that's going to be a tough sell, I think, to the connections, because you've got a horse that, look, I'm all for being prudent with horses that might be distance limited. And I think the Derby has a tendency to swallow up horses that really don't belong more often than not. But it'd be a hard sell to tell those connections the way that horse finished that he doesn't at least deserve another prep shot. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he should run in the Bluegrass. To me, a race like that where he can prove himself truly Kentucky Derby worthy if Lynch still has some doubts. Now, that being said, he had the mother of all soft trips, right? He's a fast sprint speed type that got loose and was never headed. So, I mean, you're never going to get a better result for Owen Almighty than in that lead up. So he did nothing wrong. He did everything right. He took advantage of the setup. He burst clear of them and won easy. I don't really think there's a ton to be said about him, Mikey. I think we sort of knew that if you had told me ahead of time he was going to get a relatively easy lead, Patch Adams wasn't really going to go force it, and Brodeur was going to kind of do everything he could to take Patch Adams out of the mix early, then I would have told you that Owen Almighty was probably 3 to 5. So I don't want to give him too much credit. I don't want to take away too much from him. The Chancellor McPatrick conversation to me is very different. Mm-hmm. If you liked Chancellor McPatrick coming in, you can't possibly feel as strongly about him coming out. Now, you might still like him, and there's nothing wrong with still liking him. Chancellor McPatrick to me is a sell right now. He is a horse that I don't believe that this horse is going to successfully go 2 turns. He looks like a very similar profile to a type like Practical Joke. Mm-hmm. I think he wants to go 1 turn. I think a lot of times when these horses as 2-year-olds are successful around 1 turn coming from off the pace, it's because that's their game. They very rarely get better around 2 turns. I mean, I got to ask you, at the 3/8 pole of this race, I mean, Pratt's riding high in the saddle. You're figuring this horse is going to shoot through on the inside and put a nice little charge into Owen Almighty. He never did.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a problem to me. That's not what you want to see from a horse that was supposed to make some type of advance. I know he wasn't going to come through on the inside of Owen Almighty. Once Owen Almighty closed the door on him between the 3/16 and the 8th, I mean, this was over, right? He never made a move whatsoever. He was basically 1 pace the rest of the way. I believe that he'll get better second off the layoff. I do believe that Chad Brown is capable of building him up into the kind of race that you'd want to see in the Kentucky Derby. But think about how Sierra Leone ran in his 3-year-old debut. And think about some of the good horses Chad Brown's done well with. Think about Good Magic. This wasn't that kind of effort.
I wonder, just thinking out loud here a little bit, how he would have been in this Virginia Derby coming up this weekend with that 1 turn mount and 8th. Maybe they didn't want to go quite that far, but that race may have suited him, considering the configuration. And the fact that 1 turn, that might be his cup of tea. I don't know. I mean, it would have been an interesting entrance in that spot. Now, he didn't go there, but I do think that, that would have been a more interesting maybe prep for him. I don't know.
It may have very well been. I think the timing is probably what worked against them. I wonder if maybe they should have considered the Gotham a little bit more just to get a race into him and then launch him into something. So, with that Virginia Derby being 3 weeks from the last round of big preps, it just doesn't give you a lot of options. You're going to have to come back tight on one side of the race. So, yeah, I mean, look, you'll certainly. It was interesting. Owen Almighty shut down pretty quickly on the gallop out. Chancellor McPatrick galloped by him, and then Owen Almighty kind of galloped back once he saw him get by him. So it was a little cat and mouse. But I mean, maybe I'm being a little harsh, but to me, this is a race where the winner got a 92 fig. It's just I'm going to need a lot more from Chancellor McPatrick next time.
Other stories, especially on Twitter, a buzz again with the IRAD and Jose Ortiz controversy with perhaps, Jose running a little interference, not challenging on the front, letting IRAD dictate the race. There were some people that found that a bit curious.
Yeah, understandably, I thought it was a little bit of much ado about nothing because, look, we see jockeys carry horses wide on the first turn all the time. It obviously looks worse in this scenario because this is a jockey who happens to be carrying one of the other main speed horses wide while probably taking his horse's best chance out. And the other rider happens to be his brother. So, and the trainer of the horse that they affected the most is one of the game's most successful trainers that never uses either of the Ortiz brothers. And probably the highest percentage trainer that almost never uses either one of them. And I'm not saying that would have led to them doing something untoward, but those are all facts. And I didn't think that much of it. Watch every race, every big race Mike Smith has ever had a speed horse. He always goes wide into the turn. And there were plenty of times where Florent Giroux did that with Idiomatic. So, there are times where jockeys like to do that. Sometimes it's about getting a horse away from other horses. It looked a little more deliberate than it probably should have been. So I think that's why everybody had the reaction they did. And the other part, Mikey, and I don't think it's unfair to say, is that people are sensitive when it comes to the Ortiz brothers. There's been a lot of conversation about this over the years. I'm not saying that I feel as if they do things that maybe are a little bit below board, but a lot of people do. And so social media is always going to be a match in a gas tank when it comes to those guys.
Oh, a couple other stories in the race. Hill Road, I thought a decent return, but you mentioned a slow race. Longer should suit him, but he seems more of a clunk up type. Maybe he's not necessary. Maybe that dirt, line was an aberration in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile a little bit. And Patch Adams, is he the most unluckiest horse ever, or she's just not very good?
Yeah, he feels like a horse that's just gone bad this winter. And, with the way he was training last summer and fall, the way he ran at Keeneland first out, second out at Churchill, he's been the biggest disappointment of this Derby trail so far. And so I would imagine we're going to see him get some time away, and they might just give him a little bit of time, not necessarily because anything's wrong, but because they want to let him refresh a little bit, because I think throwing him to the wolves on the Derby trail really did him in.
Another nice race on Saturday. There were several at Tampa, but the one that interests me most was that Grade 2 Hillsborough on the grass, and you had Saffron Moon winning with Pratt, but beating the South African shipper. Give Me Another from Grand Motion. I thought both raced really well. Maybe Give Me Another was maybe put up against it with the ride that she got, but both two, I think, pretty nice mares that are going to have really nice years.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we kind of been waiting on Saffron Moon to prove herself to be at this level, and it finally looks like it's happening. She was a blowout winner of her maiden. She's got a really strong second family for turf, and just didn't really put it together at any point. So now she's sort of the atypical Chad Brown horse in that she's really come into her own during the winter, whereas Chad's barn is generally designed for April through December. Right. I mean, he'll even admit it. He's not looking for horses that are going to be winning meaningful races in January and February. Gulfstream means virtually nothing to him. That's why he ran this filly at Tampa. So, where will they go from here? There's a multitude of options. It looks like she's a filly that probably a mare, I should say at this point, that can be effective from a mile and a 16th plus. So, I'm sure they'll consider Jenny Wiley, Just a Game, Distaff Turf Mile, all the way up to New York, probably. That'll be at a mile and 3/16. And that's only a 16th of a mile farther than this race was. But I'd like to see her and Give Me Another get into the gate again in the future. And, there's been a few good performances by older female turf horses this winter, some that went under the radar. The Nacho Correa's horse that won a few weeks ago at Fairgrounds on the Risen Star card, I thought it looks like she could be a really nice type too. So once everybody starts coming back, obviously I mean, the question in terms of that division is whether She Feels Pretty comes back at the same level, because She Feels Pretty just by the end of last year looked really, really strong. And I'm actually checking right now as we talk to make sure she's working, because I would assume that it's just about a safe bet that she'd be in a race like the Jenny Wiley off the layoff. I don't think that Cherie DeVoe would be scared whatsoever of doing that. And the way she's run a Keeneland in the past, I mean, that feels like something that would be really fun to see.
Yeah, that was my exact thought, that she loves Keeneland. So to put her there, and then who knows, maybe she shows up, a Derby weekend or something like that. I mean, there's plenty of options for
no
her.
workouts for She Feels Pretty in the last 60 days. That's disappointing.
Oh,
so it might be later in the year.
Well, there was a Grade 1 over the weekend, and this show is sponsored by First Racing. Let's head to the first tracks for this past weekend. Santa Anita had the Grade 1 Beholder Mile, and it was another Baffert show. Cavalieri goes to 4 for 4. I'm not sure. Visually, she looks like almost like a bicycle type horse. Like she needs to be ridden the whole way around, but she just grinds and grinds and finds a way to win.
Yeah, she really has not been all that impressive visually in the 2 stakes wins. It's funny you say that. I thought the same thing watching the races. She's the atypical Baffert horse in that she doesn't really seem to have that, at least around 2 turns against graded stakes horses. She doesn't seem to have that brilliant type speed that we've grown accustomed to seeing from so many of his horses over the years. But she's workmanlike, but still successful. And this was a race that obviously was going to feature a pretty heavy favorite in Copian before she got injured a few weeks before. And the other question mark in here was how well Ricci would stretch out, Cavalieri's stablemate that broke from the inside. So, Cavalieri checks the boxes. I mean, at this point, she looks like she's every bit as good as anybody out there, certainly out west. Be intriguing to see if Baffert maybe looks to run her in the La Troyenne or the Apple Blossom. He obviously won the Apple Blossom last year with the Dare Manor and makes regular trips to Oaklawn. So I would love to see her take on Thorpedo Anna in a month or so at Oaklawn.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Apple Blossom, and we were going to talk Thorpedo Anna, and I jumped the gun on this race here, but she returned this past weekend. Obviously, she probably would be sent for the Apple Blossom also to perhaps take on this one. She was impressive. Really, it looks like she's picked up right where she left off.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a paid workout, right? It was a very kind of foolishly ridden race by some of the guys in there. Recharge was never supposed to have let anybody else get the lead in front of her, but Brian Hernandez Jr. broke so sharply on Thorpedo Anna, put her right on the lead. It really put everybody else up against it, and both Alpine Princess and Recharge were out of position. Free Like a Girl is a cool horse. She runs every time. Louisiana bred that's banked over $2 million. But yeah, Thorpedo Anna looks none the worse for wear. It's funny. I kind of thought of this. I told a friend of mine, I said, take a Sharpie and draw a line through the Travers. And what would you think of Thorpedo Anna? I said, obviously, it would be undeniable that she wins relentlessly. But what would you think of her in general? And what you would think of her is that she's an above average female horse, right? The Travers, the race, even though she lost it, it's that speed figure that sticks out. And you think, oh my God, this is really something special. Look, don't get me wrong. She's very, very good. She's going to be beaten at some point this year by female horses. And it's going to be because somebody runs a faster race. She doesn't exactly get the way she thinks she wants it on the front end. So it's going to happen. I'm willing to make that bet as of March 10th, 2025. She will not run the table against female horses this year.
Yeah, and she gets a lot of comparisons with Rachel, even with Zenyatta, but I'm not so sure. I mean, she would really have to show something this next year to reach that level, because those two were just otherworldly, I do think, and they were so much faster. I don't know. I like Thorpedo Anna, but I don't think that she holds a candle to a couple of those.
Yeah, I am so sure they would both bury her. So yeah. And I think the people that make that comparison are probably have followed the game for like 6 or 7 years. Which, look, I'm all about new fans. I think the problem that you run into is everybody has this outrageous recency bias.
Right.
And, look, when Zenyatta, and you followed the game. I mean, you were following the game when Rachel and Zenyatta were active. So
Absolutely.
you knew, everybody was all about the two of them running against each other. And it wasn't even, I think what was lost in all of it was that it almost became as if you had to like one or the other. And it was like, what about all of us that like both?
Right.
I wanted Zenyatta to run on the dirt more. I wanted them to travel more. I wanted them to be a little less ambitious with Rachel at the end of her 3-year-old campaign, quite honestly, but they knew they weren't going to go run her on the pro ride. So yeah, I mean, look, Thorpedo Anna is very, very good. Thorpedo Anna couldn't warm up Beholder on Beholder's best days. Right. And Songbird was probably a horse that Thorpedo Anna would have a lot of trouble with. I would almost be willing to bet, and I was never really a big Songbird fan. Her 3-year-old campaign was just about every bit as good as Thorpedo Anna's. It just ended up starting later because she had some injuries earlier in the season. So yeah, she's very, very good. Don't get me wrong. I feel and the whole thing with like the Grizzly, like it makes my skin crawl. I have no issue with her. I'm rooting for her. I like her a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing her in the Apple Blossom and moving forward, but it's okay for some people to believe that she's not as good as Twitter thinks she is.
Well, let's get back to Santa Anita Saturday, and the San Simeon was raced also there, and your buddy Air Force Red, I heard you on the pre-show previewing this horse and saying that, you probably were going to find a way to bet him. Well, did you play him?
Yeah, I couldn't at 9-2, right? He's like, he is like my kryptonite. I love the horse. I feel like he's been in every like wrong spot, right trip, right spot, wrong trip. He's just a hard luck horse. And I'll tell you what, credit to Leonard Powell and Eclipse. Eclipse is, I'm not involved in any racing partnerships. I had a piece of one horse once, but I'll tell you what, if I wanted horses out west, I'd buy into Eclipse in a heartbeat. And that's, of course, in addition to our friends at Little Red Feather. The Eclipse horses look like, they win a lot, right? It's a well-run organization. Them and Little Red Feather both do a great job. So this is a horse that came back in a week, Mikey, right? I mean, and I'm guessing that Leonard Powell had this in mind the whole time. I don't think he ran in the kill row and then decided on Monday morning, you know what the hell, let's enter in the San Simeon too. So he must have had the quick cutback and quick comeback on his mind. And I'll tell you what, he always traveled well. Even when they got to the dirt, it looked like he had a ton of horse. And once he kind of got himself some room, it was a very patient ride, a very, very good ride all in all. And he's a fun horse. So I was glad to see him get the win. The favorite, I didn't think really had any excuse at all. Soft trip, stalking the pace, and totally empty late, that being Mucho del Oro. So, yeah, nice to see Air Force Red get a deserved win.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice horse there. And quite the, back in 7. That's something you don't see very often anymore. Well, a couple great couple stakes races at Gulfstream on Saturday, and a horse that I know that you and I both like, and you mentioned that off air that you did pick this horse. Iman won the 5 furlong Silks Run Stakes. That was race 5 on Saturday. Paid $22, was the second longest shot in the board, and he wasn't even on the screen until about the last 3 jumps.
It's crazy. You were looking at his chiclet at the bottom to see if he was getting closer, and all of a sudden Pete Aiello called his name and was like, wow, he's flying. And he got up just in time. Yeah, well-timed ride there. Horse that, classic case of connections, got ambitious and ran him in some spots that he deserved to try, but they were a little too tough for him. And now he was getting back to what he does best, which is turf sprint in South Florida. Obviously, I picked him when Coppola was in the race, which his job got a lot easier with Coppola coming out. And I think it changed the pace scenario a little bit as well. I would assume we'll see Coppola in a few weeks at Keeneland. But he's a horse who's run exceptionally well every single time at Gulfstream. But yeah, it was nice to see Eamon get a little bit of love there in what was just a furious late finish.
Yeah, interesting with Coppola. I'm not sure if you listened to Pete had Muhammad Mubarak on the pod a week ago or so, and I think they're thinking Dubai with him.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, and I think they were looking for a prep in this spot. Now I'm not sure what's going on now as far as why they would miss here or what the thoughts are, but I know that's what they're thinking with him, and as long as everything's right, I think that they might be headed to the desert with that horse.
I mean, look, straight away 5 for $1 million could do a lot worse.
Yeah. And apparently too, that, he had a breathing issue that they corrected also. So that's, another thing that, just an interesting little tidbit. If you catch on some of the shows on the network with some of these connections, you can learn a lot of things there. So this is, more for the audience here to check out some of these extra podcasts, because there's plenty of good information all over the network.
This is Mikey delicately reminding me to listen more to the network, which is a good piece of advice.
It has nothing to do with you.
I'm kidding. It's a good piece of advice for everybody.
They ran the Hurricane Birdie also on Saturday at Gulfstream, and another one you guys were very high on over the weekend. Nick Style was the favorite there, $1.20. and got another nice win. Pretty popular there. Came from a little bit off the pace, but got a nice ride, nice trip, and got it done.
Well, I mean, I don't think the plan was for her to be that far back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the two Saffie Joseph Jr. horses, if you own Spirit Wind, you kind of got to look at Saffie afterwards and be like, really? That was really the plan with your other horse, was to push and I mean, they end up going like 44 flat, and it cost Spirit Wind even a placing. And Nick Style was still sort of all out to run down Our Disaster, who ran incredibly well. So yeah, I don't know. I think Nick Style has not really moved forward. I don't know if maybe some of these Florida races with maybe a faster pace where she's been a little bit off of it has been problematic, but I kind of thought she'd run better. I thought she'd get better as time went by. So we'll see. I mean, she's still nice. She was a good 3-year-old filly late in the year and still has potential. But really the story of that race was how well Our Disaster ran. And I'm not sure I'm buying her running that well anywhere else. So we'll have to see. But a nice win for Nick Style, who's a very aptly named horse.
Well, Sunday at Gulfstream, there was a returning 3-year-old from the Chad Brown barn there, and it's a horse named Prater. Came back, looked all a bit 1-9 in a 1X allowance on Sunday. Ended up 2-5 and winning, but low figure. I mean, 79. I know we talked off air. You thought maybe that figure was it's a little suspect.
Yeah. So the problem is, and look, I mean, having made buyer speed figures for years, I can tell you that this is a major problem with which is when you have these long cards with a very, very limited number of dirt races. So, I mean, you take yesterday's Gulfstream card, it began on the poly track, then turf, Tapeta, turf, Tapeta. Then you had a 6-furlong dirt race, turf, dirt, Tapeta, dirt. So you had 3 dirt races the entire day. Those dirt races were run at 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs, and a mile. So, what you're trying to do when you're making final time speed figures is come up with some equalizer that gets those 3 dirt races on level footing. You really can't do that when one is at a mile and the other 2 are sprints. Those miles start at a different part of the racetrack, a part of the racetrack that's not really ever manicured regularly with any kind of tractor. They're going to rake it in the morning. They're not going to touch it again until right before the race. So you have a lot of issues with that. This was also a race that, in my opinion, and I'm going to wait and see what the Timeform US looks like, was run at an exceptionally fast pace. 45 and change going a mile at Gulfstream is flying. The other speed horse was nowhere. The other horse that looked like a contender was nowhere and ended up getting a speed figure that was, it was 12 points better than his last, but it was 12 points worse than his best. And I just don't know if Prater beating Kinetic Control means that Kinetic Control could have possibly only run a 66. So, what am I saying? I don't want to go on and on about this. I'm splitting hairs. I mean, maybe it was an 85. Maybe it was an 88. It will be interesting to see where Chad goes with this horse. I think it's going to tell us a lot about how he feels about him. If he feels strongly enough to run him in the wood, the bluegrass, something like that, I think he probably likes him. Or Chad has been so astute when it has come to finding these horses that he sort of takes the backdoor route to the Preakness.
Right.
And maybe this is his horse this year. It wouldn't surprise. I don't know if the connections of this horse will be as willing as some of the horses he's had in the past where he could convince them to go to the Preakness. But this horse would make a lot of sense as like a Lexington horse than go into the Preakness. So I could see that as a possibility as well. But I still think if we see this horse on the first Saturday in April somewhere, Chad still believes there's a reasonable chance he's a Derby caliber horse.
One more stake over the weekend at Santa Anita, and it was Sunday. And, this was the Pasadena. It was 100,000 going a mile, and Freedom's Not Free ended up the winner. I think this is a pretty nice horse here. Was able to rate kindly. I thought he got kind of a really iffy ride last time. The figure came up decent, 84. This is a horse I think that has a future for sure.
Yeah, these West Coast turf horses feel like they're better than they've been in the past because the Mullins horse that won earlier in the year, Artislas, he feels like he's nice. I guess he's on the shelf. He worked last couple of weeks, so maybe he's going he's coming east or something like that. But yeah, no, this horse looked good. I agree. I agree. And I think, there's a lot more turf racing out west than there's been in quite some time. And I think that might contribute to it quite a bit as well. So, yeah, the Baffert horse that was favored on the morning line in this race is just totally dirt bred, being out of Tufts' assist. But then there was also a scratch. Jonathan Thomas scratched Will then. So that kind of, looked like it would have a little bit of an effect on the latter part of the race. But no, all in all, Freedom's Not Free ran very well, 4-5 when all was said and done. And a horse that definitely has a relatively bright future, I would think.
Nick, anything else you saw over this past weekend? I know we're looking forward to the Virginia Derby this weekend, but anything else?
No, nothing terribly significant. It was a good running of the Florida Oaks at Tampa, won by Nitrogen, coming from a little bit off the pace. You mentioned talking about the Tampa undercard races. I didn't really think there was much going on there. We'll see those horses a lot, too, over the next few months. There's a million graded stakes for 3-year-old fillies on the turf around the country. So, no, another good weekend, and it feels like we're really picking up steam now, right? Virginia Derby leads into Louisiana Derby, Arkansas Derby, and Florida Derby, Dubai, Wood, Santa Anita Derby, Bluegrass. We're hot and heavy now.
Absolutely. And well, this has been fun. I really enjoyed being here with you. Pete will be back next week, I think, to recap with you. If you're listening on the audio side, if you didn't catch the Michael McCarthy interview, that's going to follow this. So, and if you're watching on YouTube and you missed that, you can catch the video. Jump on to the In the Money YouTube channel because there's videos now daily. You can catch a lot of daily coverage leading up to the Derby. And that's been a production of In the Money Media. We'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the week. Check out the Virginia Derby coverage this week. Thanks, Nick, for doing this.
Anytime, my friend. Good luck.